Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating tool in the world of real estate, the purchase option. It's this unique way you can get control over a property you don't even own yet. So, let's get right into it. Just imagine this for a second. You find the perfect house. The one. But, the timing's just not right. Maybe you need another 6 months to pull the down payment together, or you're just waiting for that new job to come through. In a fast-moving market, that house is going to be gone in a flash. But what if? What if you could lock in today's price and give yourself time to decide? Think about it like this. It's kind of like putting a must-have item on hold at your favorite store, or maybe snagging those amazing concert tickets before they're all sold out. You're paying a small fee, right? But not for the thing itself. You're paying for the exclusive right to buy it later. You get the choice, all the power, but absolutely none of the obligation. And that, right there, is the core idea of a purchase option. So here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to nail down exactly what a purchase option is. Then we'll look at the two main players, the buyer and the seller. After that, we'll peek inside the actual agreement, talk about the all-important race against the clock, and finally, explore the two ways this whole thing can end. All right, let's get down to brass tacks. What exactly is a real property purchase option when we're talking legal terms? Okay, so that sounds a bit formal, right? But the magic is in a few key phrases here. The big ones are a right without obligating and within a specified time. What this all means is that the buyer gets the power to choose, while the seller is basically agreeing to wait for them to make that choice, all inside a clearly defined window of time. It's really a contract for the opportunity to buy, not the property itself. And this brings us to our two key players. You have the buyer, who's also called the optionee, and the seller, who's the owner. And what's so interesting is that in this kind of deal, the relationship is, well, it's surprisingly one-sided. And this just lays it out perfectly, doesn't it? The buyer is holding all the cards. They have the right to buy, but there is zero obligation for them to follow through. The seller, though, they're totally locked in. If the buyer decides to pull the trigger within that agreed-upon time, the seller has to sell. They can't just change their mind or get a better offer from someone else. It's a true one-way street. So what do you actually need to make one of these agreements legit and legally binding? Well, there are a few essential ingredients that have to be in the mix. The absolute key here is clarity. You've got to have the exact purchase price spelled out, no wiggle room. You need what's called the consideration, that's the fee for the option, and you absolutely must have a hard deadline. On top of that, just like a normal contract, it should cover other stuff like financing or payment terms. Oh, and of course, because we're talking about real estate, it has to be in writing to be enforceable. Let's just focus on that word consideration for a second, because it's super important. This is not a down payment. It's not a deposit that goes towards the house. No, this is a non-refundable fee the buyer pays just for the privilege of having the option. You can think of it as the seller's compensation for taking their house off the market and waiting around. And if the buyer decides to walk away, well, the seller gets to keep that fee for their time and trouble. Okay, so now let's talk about maybe the most intense element of an option agreement, and that's time. This is no casual, open-ended deal. Nope. This is a full-on race against a ticking clock. You see this phrase in law, time is of the essence, and you need to know it's a very big deal. It basically means that the deadlines written in the contract are not just suggestions. They are rock solid, rigid, and final. If that option says it expires at 5 p.m. on Friday, showing up at 5:01 p.m. is just too late. The right is gone. Poof. And courts take this very, very seriously. And this timeline just shows it perfectly. The second that agreement is signed, the clock starts ticking. For that whole option period, the buyer is in complete control, sitting in the driver's seat. But the instant that expiration date hits, that right to purchase just vanishes into thin air, like it was never even there. And it's interesting. The source material points out that if for some reason no time is specified, the law will imply a reasonable time. But what's reasonable? That's exactly why you always want a specific date. It gets rid of all the guesswork. Think about a big developer, right? They might want to build a new shopping center. So they could take out options on, say, 5 different pieces of land next to each other, maybe for a year. That gives them the time they need to get all the zoning and financing sorted out without having to buy all that land up front. If the whole project falls through, they just lose their option fees, not millions on land they can't use. See, that's the real power here. So the clock has been ticking down, that deadline is right around the corner, and the buyer has to make a choice. And this brings us to the two and only two possible outcomes. Okay, path number 1. The buyer goes for it. They exercise the option, they give the seller official notice, and in that exact moment, the option literally transforms into a regular binding purchase agreement. The sale just moves forward. And then there's path number 2. The buyer does nothing. The deadline just comes and goes, the option expires, and the whole deal is over. The buyer is out their consideration fee, and the seller, well, they're now free to sell their property to anyone they want. Now there's just one last little bit of legal housekeeping to mention. Sometimes a buyer will publicly record their option to protect their interest, but if they let it expire, that public record can create what's called a cloud on the property's title. It kind of makes it look like someone might still have a claim. So to fix this, the buyer just files a simple document called a quitclaim deed, which officially releases their interest. It's just a cleanup step that leaves the property title crystal clear for the owner. So when you boil it all down, a purchase option is really a strategic move. It's a contract that gives a potential buyer the 2 things they often crave the most: control over a deal and the time they need to make the right call, all for a fee they agreed on upfront. And that really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. When you can control a valuable asset like a house, freeze its price in time, and still have the complete freedom to just walk away with a minimal loss, have you just used a simple legal tool, or have you actually tapped into a real estate superpower? Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.